couple of weeks ago, I released a video arguing that, contrary to popular myth, MMA fighters are some of the nicest and most humble people around, and that their aggressiveness is mostly just a marketing stunt. What struck me though, and this happened to me already before, was what I discovered in the comments section of the video. A lot of people agreed with me that most MMA fighters they've met were the nicest people too. But on the other hand though, many of these same people pointed out that some of the most arrogant people they've met were actually traditional martial artists. At first sight, it appears crazy. Aren't traditional martial arts such as karate, various styles of kung fu, and aikido usually emphasizing such values as respect, honor, and humility? Yet as I also used this concept in my previous video, free makes a pattern, meaning that if the same thing is being said by various unrelated to each other people, it is generally an indicator that there is a reason for it. That is not to say that it means that the argument is true, but instead, it means that there is usually a reason for that belief, which is worth taking a closer look at. I'm also driven to explore this subject because, well, to be honest, having spent more than a decade being an active member of traditional martial arts, and over the time having met various martial artists in the realm, I've had the same experience too. Most of the arrogant people I've met were in traditional martial arts, and most people in MMA and BJJ were mostly humble. Of course, not everyone that I've met in traditional martial arts, aka TMA, were arrogant individuals, but proportionally, I've met loads of people who led themselves in TMA and very few of such people in MMA or BJJ, the two combat sports I've been mainly focusing on for the past few years. Yet again, that does not mean that there are no arrogant people in MMA and BJJ whatsoever, but it appears that proportionally, based on my own experience and that of many people that I've met, there is a significant difference which favors the two previously mentioned combat sports. What is left to do in this video is to ask ourselves and explore the reasons behind it. As a longtime TMA practitioner who transitioned to BJJ and then later MMA, I've asked myself this question a lot. My final answer came down primarily to this one. The crucial difference between many traditional martial artists and our two discussed combat sports is the aspect of sparring or live drilling, or lack thereof. Both in MMA and BJJ you spar or grapple. A lot. It is a common tradition in BJJ to grapple, or based on the native lingo, to roll, pretty much every training. In many gyms, even in your first class. Not that I personally think it's a great method, but I do find it to be common. While sparring in MMA is more common at slightly higher levels of training, it is still a crucial aspect of its training regime, without which MMA or BJJ wouldn't be what they are. In BJJ, it is also common enough practice for the instructor to occasionally, if not sometimes always, to roll with their students too. And what does that do with a person's level of arrogance, also by many referred to as ego? Well, simply said, it destroys it. If you haven't experienced that personally, let me give you an example of how that works. You come into a BJJ class for the first time, let's say, as a big guy. You think you're tough because you lift weights, you've wrestled with your brothers at home, and you watch UFC every weekend. Then, as it happens, you are paired together to roll with a significantly smaller than yourself lady. You think to yourself, what an insult, I have to roll with her? Well, I'll be nice and go easy. 20 seconds later, the little lady is choking you out. You think, okay, that was her luck. This time I'll go a bit harder. 15 seconds later, you are forced to tap/surrender again. You slowly start to get frustrated and then think, okay, let me show you what I'm really capable of, and dedicate most of your energy doing the next roll. A minute later, you wake up from being unconscious, since due to your aggression, you were choked out by her entirely in 10 seconds. If you've been part of the BJJ community, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't tried BJJ yet, trust me, stories like this are not uncommon. Worst case scenario, exchange the little lady in the story with a 14-year-old scrawny kid, or 60-year-old senior guy, etc. Experiences like these are humbling. It makes you realize so quickly that you are not the baddest man in the room. Most likely, you never were. You just thought that to yourself. Pretty much the same happens in MMA too. As all experienced fighters know, there will always be someone tougher, faster, or better than you. It's just a matter of time until you will bump into them. If anything, the more arrogant MMA fighters are usually beginners, who still think they are big shots while training with their equals. But then, you enter the pro team, and reality hits you. And it hits you again, and again. And so, for the rest of your training life, consistently reminding you that in the end, you're not that bad, but you're still just a human being that can be beaten, and you never know who will be the one doing the beating. Sometimes it will be a tough, scary-looking MMA fighter. Another day, it will be a scrawny little kid who turns out has been fighting since he is 3 years old. He kicks your ass and then reminds you very clearly to not judge a book by its cover. I very clearly remember how I was sitting in a car together with a successful UFC fighter, having a chat, during which he told me that if a much bigger guy would attack him in a bar, he would fight back, of course, but he wouldn't be sure of his victory because he knows just how much size matters. And this is a very capable, humble MMA fighter saying this to me, who constantly faces the reality of fighting in the gym and thus does not keep his head in the clouds. Now let's look at some of the traditional martial arts. I'm most familiar with Aikido, so I will start with it as an example in my mind, but it applies to many traditional martial arts. You come to the dojo, you're shown what is what, given a brief explanation, and then you join the training. Dozens of complex movements are taught to you that initially you don't understand any of. You are humbled at first due to this experience, but with each year of training, you start to get them. In fact, you become so good at them that you rarely get any more criticism about them at all. You also become the senior black belt, who is unquestioned by newer people, since that's usually how TMAs work. There is no sparring, there is no competition. Everyone looks up to you, everyone praises you, you simply are the best. Even if Sensei sometimes scolds you, he's only just one person. Everyone else tells you that you are a badass. Are you beginning to see the problem? But wait, there's more. How do you know that you're that good in most traditional martial arts where there's usually no sparring? Well, once again, because you're good at what you're asked to do, and everybody, including the sensei, says that your techniques will work in the street. And surely sensei knows what he's talking about. Allegedly, based on the stories going around, he once took down 5 guys that attacked him. Or even better yet, his sensei did. For most people, that is enough information. They feel no need to pressure test or question their skills, because everyone in their surroundings are telling them that it's all good. And what happens when you're in such environment under such circumstances? Have everyone around you say that you are the best enough times without facing failure, and trust me, you will start to think it's true. Feel like you're the best without facing failure, and your ego will grow. It takes huge integrity and honesty not to become arrogant under these conditions, and most people just go for this ride and enjoy it. They believe they are the best, and along the way, they become proud of it, aka arrogant. Even in traditional martial arts which do have competition or sparring, in most cases it's not mandatory to compete, or sometimes even to spar. You can go high up the ranks without it, aka without experiencing your true limitations or significant repeated failure. In other cases, the sparring is based on very heavy rules and little risk involved. It's one thing to get choked out or to be punched in the face. It's another to be gently touched and lose a point because of it. Heavy rules may also be hacked by using them to your favor and becoming superior by playing the game well. Or the aspect of hierarchy may as well make you feel superior without really testing your limitations. There are some traditional martial arts dojos that avoid these circumstances, usually by being led by a level-headed sensei who has a better sense of reality and thus do not fall prey to the outcome of arrogance. As there are also MMA gyms which are packed with knuckleheads who are only sparring with each other, never really competing outside of the gym's 4 walls, under a coach who had 2 smoker fights 20 years ago.